Welcome to Devotions from Israel, a 5-minute word of encouragement. Today's passage comes from Jonah, chapter 1. Well, Jonah was one who ran away from God's direction for his life. Can we relate to that? God called him to go to Nineveh, and yet initially Jonah chose not to do this. Now, we should not be at all surprised because the Ninevites were the arch enemy of the day to the Israelites. It happened here at the port of Jaffa, or Joppa, also pronounced in that way. Behind me is the beautiful port, what it looks like today. In fact, this port was used by Solomon as beams of cedar would be drifted down from Lebanon to Jaffa, and then transported from the harbor there to Jerusalem for the building of the temple. The same thing would happen in the days of Ezra and Nehemiah. Lumber would come into the harbor and be used for the temple. However, in this case, and in chapter 1 of Jonah, Jonah was invited to leave the harbor and follow God's direction. And yet he chose not to do this. Perhaps we know the story, and it's familiar to us. The word of the Lord came to Jonah, the son of Amittai, "Go to the great city of Nineveh and preach against it, because its wickedness has come up before me." But Jonah ran away from the Lord and headed for Tarshish. He went down to Joppa, where he found a ship bound for that port. After paying the fare, he went abroad and sailed for Tarshish to flee from the Lord. Then the Lord sent a great wind on the sea, and such a violent storm arose that the ship threatened to break up, and all the sailors were afraid, and each cried out to his own god. And they threw the cargo into the sea to lighten the ship. But Jonah had gone below deck, where he lay down and fell into a deep sleep. And the captain went to him and said, "How can you sleep? Get up and call on your God. Maybe he will take notice of us so that we will not perish." Then the sailors said to each other, "Come, let us cast lots to find out who is responsible for this calamity." They cast lots, and the lot fell on Jonah. So they asked him, "Tell us, who is responsible for making all this trouble for us? What kind of work do you do? Where do you come from? What is your country? From what people are you?" He answered, "I am a Hebrew, and I worship the Lord, the God of heaven, who made the sea and the dry land." This terrified them, and they asked, "What have you done?" They knew he was running away from the Lord, because he had already told them so. So the sea was getting rougher and rougher, so they asked him, "What should we do to you to make the sea calm down for us?" "Pick me up and throw me into the sea," he replied, "and it will become calm. I know that it is my fault that this great storm has come upon you." Instead, the men did their best to row back to the land, but they could not, for the sea grew even wilder than before. Then they cried out to the Lord, "Please, Lord, do not let us die for taking this man's life." Then they took Jonah and threw him overboard, and the raging sea grew calm. I think we all know what happened in the next chapter. God is faithful to Jonah, even though he ran away or disobeyed the call. And his life, Jonah's life, is spared by the great fish. He learned his lesson the hard way. Jonah would eventually go to Nineveh, and still with a complaining spirit, I might add, and yet God would use him. You see, God wants to use us, and even though we may run away from his direction in our life or for our life, he invites us to be faithful to the kingdom message, to share that with others freely. He wants to use you. He wants to use me. And even though perhaps at times we don't feel adequate, he has called us nonetheless. So be encouraged, my friends, just as God had a purpose and a plan for Jonah, he has a purpose and plan for you as well. Until next time, shalom.